And welcome back, everyone, to the Pokemon Team Creation Series. And coming to us from Sandra Mendoza Rivera, or River, I might have messed up the last name. You've been asking for a little while, and I knew it was coming. That's why I really didn't respond. I try not to respond to too many comments because I just don't have time to respond to every single comment. But the team for the Powerpuff Girls. Yes, I will get through all four of them. Apparently, there was the other one. Was it? It's Blossom, Bubbles, Buttercup, Bliss. That's the other one they made. So yes, I will get through all of them, but do not expect them anytime soon. Like everyone else has got videos to get to too, suggestions. Regardless, we're gonna start with the leader, Blossom. And I'm a big. Hey, look, I'm a 30-something-year-old white man is sitting in his room here saying I loved the Powerpuff Girls, and I will hear nothing to the contrary on that. I'm going to turn my volume up just a little bit. I heard, I had some people say the volume was a little odd in the last video, so I'm going to turn the volume up a little bit, see if it helps. So I'm not going to turn it all the way up because that might cause some issues. But let me know if that's better. So I'm a big fan of the Powerpuff Girls, and I remember a lot of the Powerpuff Girls. But when making a team individually for each of them, that's when you have to start going into the bit of the deep lore a little bit. Like, okay, what do I have to remember here? So as I said in the last video when we talked about how well the team would do, going from the top left of the screen to the bottom right, that is the order in which her team would form. And obviously the top right would be her starter. And when it comes to the girls, one of the big tropes that's always going to go through each of their teams is the fact there's going to be a fighting type on the team, because that's predominantly how they fight. They use their fists, they fly, they're super strong, super fast, super durable, all that. But I want a fighting type on each team that is unique to them in some way. I want that. You should also note that there's going to be a couple carryovers from each team apart from the unique stuff. So, for example, their starter is probably going to be a fighting type that's kind of unique to them and represents them. So starting with Blossom, because she is arguably the smartest, the most intelligent, and the most mature of the group, I wanted a fighting type Pokemon that was a bit more a representation of intellectual fighting. Not necessarily like a psychic type per se, like fighting with your mind, but using your mind maybe in combat. And since it's a starter, I went with Medicham, but Mega Medicham. I thought Mega Medicham was actually not a bad idea here. Because it is one of the only normal fighting psychic types around. The idea of it being a guru and all that, meditation and fighting, using your mind over matter and mind along with your physicality, I think works in Blossom's favor for description. Plus, in description of like who she is versus the Pokemon. Plus, color-coded, so it's red. So that's just a little bonus. The next two Mon, unfortunately, are what really hurt this team when I did how well the team would do. Because remember, I don't try to balance out the team. I don't even look for a fully evolved team. I just try to find a Mon that fits that character. And one of the things she is a bookworm. She likes reading a book. She likes reading a book. She's very fond of like just her time reading and all that. So what better way than an actual bookworm with Blipbug? And this works on a bit more of a level in terms of game when you think about it, because a young trainer like her would most likely, theoretically, when you meet her, would be on one of the early routes where she'd have an unevolved Blipbug. Unfortunately, Blipbugs are weak as hell. Even if I were to hypothetically give it access to every single egg move it could learn, it still at best would only have a couple bug moves and the move recovered. That's it. So yeah, this is really more just her reading companion. It does have some moves that can like ward off like attackers or something like that, but it's not really a combat Pokemon, although it can try to do its best. Now, these next two Mon represent two aspects of her special ability. All the girls apparently do have a special ability. With Blossom, it was her Ice Breath, but her Ice Breath temporarily turned into a Fire Breath after the fact. But it's only ever been seen like once in the show. So I knew I did still want something to represent that. And I wanted something to kind of go with a color coding for the girls. Because you got Blossom, who's reddish pink, Buttercup, who's green, and Bubbles, who's blue. Well, luckily, we have a trio of Mon that actually represent that. Pansear. The elemental monkeys represent that. So, it makes sense. Now, I could have gone Simisear. But, again, because she's a young girl, because also the fire is nowhere near as potent as, say, her Ice Breath, and even more to the point that she's never used the fire since then, so maybe it was just kind of a byproduct of overusing her ice. That seems to be the idea of it. Is like if she tries to use her ice breath after she's overused it, it becomes as fire instead. I decided to go with Semi-Seer or Panseer. Now Panseer actually, when you actually look at all of its move set, is not that even though its stats are weak, adds a solid move set to it, so it's not that bad. But then I knew I needed a mon that represented the ice breath, and there's plenty to choose from. But Blossom also thinks of herself as very pretty. And I think she's also vain enough, I believe, to think of herself as the most beautiful. So I went with an elegant ice type in Alolan Ninetales. I need to update that image. It's a blurry image. But Alolan Ninetales. And that makes sense. The idea of fairies going with the girls, that makes a lot of sense. And it literally looks like ice vapor. I love Alolan Ninetales design. I really do. So one of the obscure things about Blossom is the fact apparently her bow is actually an explosive bomb that she can use in a pinch. So I'm like, well, that's unique. All right, let me find a Pokemon that can learn Explosion. We'll go from there. So what mon with Explosion works? I like the idea of Electrode because it's a little more than a ball. It is just a Pokeball that came to life, more or less. Voltorb is more so that, but still. And a ball would be a children's play toy. Electrode probably has a lot of fun just being tossed around by the girls. And because they're durable, the girls are durable enough to take the explosion. If he were to self-destruct or shock them, they'd be able to take it. So yeah, he probably just has a lot of fun being, being a toy for them. Because they, he's like Electrode. He probably rolls around. They run on top of him and stuff like that. So they probably have fun doing that. Finally, though, there's one other trio that came to mind. The Lake Trio, were a combination of knowledge, will, and compassion, I believe. Is it knowledge, will, and emotion? One second. The Lake Trio. I literally just looked this up, but I need to remember the Lake Trio. They are represented because we have. I know knowledge and will are one. I always forget the third one. Is that compassion or is it literally emotion? They literally represent knowledge, emotion, and will. So, of the three, which one made the most sense for the girls? I was initially going to go Azelf because of its red coloring and it works well for Buttercup. But Azelf, if I'm remembering correctly, is the mon that represents willpower. No, is it emotion? I can never remember. Is it will or emotion? Either way, the one that represents knowledge is Uxie. And that's the one that really, when you think of the girls, is the best fit. Buttercup is definitely more of the willpower, and Bubbles is definitely more of the emotion. So, spoilers for when I do those teams. Those guys are going to be making it on the team. Plus, the elemental monkeys will also be on there. But yeah, I think that made the most sense. It's the most defensive of the three. It's got the best defenses, and it's arguably, it's the knowledge fits Blossom more than the others. So that's the team. The question, as always, is twofold. How balanced is it, and how well would this team do within each region? Balance-wise, that team isn't that bad. It does have two weaknesses to fire with both Blipbug and Alolan Ninetales. It's got two weaknesses to Ghost when it comes to Uxie and it comes to Medicham. It's got two weaknesses to Flying when it comes to Medicham and it comes to Blipbug. It's got two weaknesses to Ground when it comes to Electrode and Pansage, or Pancham. And it has three weaknesses to Rock, which was unfortunate because Alolan Ninetales being Ice, Blipbug being Rock, yeah. So, but apart from that, how balanced is this team? Remember, I go from top left to bottom right. That's the order. So that's Meditite would be your starter. And as I said, this became problematic early on because the only real mon that's going to be doing most of the work here is Meditite going into Mage until you get to the Alolan Ninetales. Panseer is able to pull its own weight with some of the gyms, but not all of them. So starting out, Meditite would be able to take care of Brock no problem, and be able to handle Misty, while Blipbug wouldn't be able to do much. It would still be able to maybe get a shot in on Starmie. And honestly, even Surge shouldn't be that big of a problem because Meditite, honestly, is going to be able to cleave through a bunch of those guys without too much difficulty. Then once you get to, Erica? Erica, you have now a fire type who at that point should be in its late 20s, early 30s, even with it being only a base form fire type. That should still be able to put some work against a grass type gym. Plus, Ninetales alone should be able to one-shot that. By the time you get to Koga, you should have your Medicham, and therefore you should have a Mega Medicham. At that point, then it's fine because Psychic beats Poison, no problem. You should also have no issue with Sabrina because you should have a full team at that point. This team's not really weak to Psychic. It's not overly strong against it either, but you should be able to handle it without too much problem. Blaine did prove to be a bit of a problem because Alolan Ninetales, who's one of your aces on this team, it can't handle a fire team. So that's problematic. Blipbob is also too weak, and Pancham, I keep saying Pancham, Pansear is just too weak of a fire type to make a big difference. However, Medicham being able to Mega Evolve, Electrode having electric attacks and Explosion, and Uxie's defenses should get you through there. And Giovanni actually shouldn't be a problem just because you have fighting type moves and powerful ones on Medicham and Ninetales. Honestly, your biggest problem for going up against Elite Four, it's not Lorelei because again, Medicham should be able to handle the ice types without too much difficulty. Bruno should not be honestly that big of a problem. He barely has any. His fighting type mon honestly are not an issue. Agatha's Poison and Ghost are somewhat of an issue, but again, Medicham being able to Mega Evolve really helps, and you should be able to help cover off a lot of, like, her Gold Bats are going to go down to the Ninetales or Electro, no issue. Ninetales can even handle Lance's team without any issue. Honestly, though, the problem just comes down to Blue's team is all fully evolved, and it's a completely diversified team, which means Blipbug and Pansy are going to go down quick, which means you're really only going to be having those four. And I don't think you can handle that team very well. I mean, it would depend admittedly on which starter he had, but honestly, he has an answer to pretty much everything on that team. Honestly, your Mega Medicham is the only thing that's really going to be able to pull through for a bit, and even then, I don't see it happening. So while it would be tight, you get all the way to the champion, you can't do Kanto. What you can become the champion of, though, I believe, is Johto. Unfortunately, and I'm going to sum this up because I've having a tendency of dragging this on too long, Johto, I think, is the only one you can become champion in. And that's being kind because even though you'll struggle with Faulkner, I think you can still handle it because you have Psychic-type moves. You have no good answer for Bugsy. Like, you have no Psychic and Fighting-type moves aren't strong against Bug types. So Medicham is actually no good against the Bug-type gym that early on. And the only other thing you have is Blipbug. So you honestly might not even make it past that. But if by some chance you are capable of making it past that, honestly, most of the other region is a cinch. Because Meditite can take care of Whitney, no problem. You should be able to handle Morty because you'll have Ninetales at that point. You should be able to handle Chuck because you'll have Electro to deal with Poliwrath. And Medicham should be able to deal with Machoke with Psychic type moves. You should have no problem dealing with Steelix and the other Steel types from Jasmine. You shouldn't have any problem with Price. And Ninetales is going to cleave through most of Claire's team. Honestly, the one you're going to struggle with the most is probably the first Elite Four member of that group. Because this team, like I said, doesn't have a strong answer to Psychic types. But that being said, having Alolan Ninetales on the team, having Electrode, and having Uxie, who just have enough variety on the team and fully evolved stats, or legendary stats, should be able to handle it. And the rest of them, Bruno, you should be able to handle without too much difficulty again. Lucian, I believe that's the name of that, the Elite Four member there, with the Dark type. Medicham alone should be able to handle that because you have Mega. And Lance with Ninetales should be able to handle no problem. Hoenn, I'm going to tell you right now, Hoenn, I'm going to just sum it up real quick. Sum it up where you basically stop instead. Hoenn, you'll pretty much kind of be met with a wall when you get to Flannery. This is due to the fact that at that point you'll have Ninetales and still only have a Meditite, Blipbug, and Pansear. Your fully evolved Mon Ninetales is a ice type, and the fairy types aren't resistant to fire. So that thing's going down fast. Other than that, I don't honestly think you get past Flannery, which is a first. If you are lucky to do that, though, you should be able to handle Norman Winona, I believe that's the flying type gym leader's name. That wouldn't be difficult, but Electrode and Ninetales should be able to carry you. But then you reach a wall with Liza and Tate because they don't just have 2 psychic types. They have 2 psychic rock types, and rock is a problem for this team. This team, except for Medicham, nothing on this team has an answer for rock. And even then, it's rock psychic, so the answer Medicham had is no longer valid. And I don't even think you can get past Juan or Wallace, quite frankly. They have 5 teams. I mean, yes, Electro can do a lot of work, but against, say, like Wishcash, no, the only way to get past that is to, self-destruct. Then Uxie can do some work, but not enough. And honestly, you can't even beat this Elite Four very well. The Dark type gym leader, Elite Four member, you should have no problem with. But then you got the Ghost type, which again, this team does not have any good answers for. Not only that, Explosion, you can't even use Electrode's Explosion to get one free win because Ghost types are immune to normal. And if you go to the Ice team, well, yeah, Medicham can handle a lot of that team, but that's not a guarantee. And then, sure, Ninetales could handle most of what Drake dishes out, but at that point, then you get all the way to freaking Steven. And be honest, Medicham isn't going to help you much here because he starts off with Skarmory. And this team is not good against Steel types. That's not true. Panseer could do a lot of work, but it's not fully evolved. So I don't believe you could become the champion of Hoenn just with this team. I don't think you could. And you certainly are not becoming the Sinnoh champion. Let me put it this way. The third gym is where the problems arise in either Platinum or Diamond or Pearl. Because it's either a fighting type gym where you still only have a meta type, and that's not going to cut it. Or it's a ghost type gym where you still only have a meta type, and it's not going to cut it. You can't even do much against Crash or Wake because you still don't have a Medicham at that point. You are not getting past even the main. Again, remember, I'm not talking about overleveling your mon so you can do it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about staying within the, you can be a level or 2 over. That's not a problem, but staying within the level caps generally. You can't get past this. You can't even have a full team in this region. Even if by miracle upon miracles you can get past, you still got to deal with Wagner, who's way more than anything on this team can handle. This team is not prepped to deal with electric types very well. Now, granted, it's not weak to electric types, but again, Blipbug and Panseer at this point are just weaklings. Then you got to deal with the Elite Four, and that Elite Four is a tough Elite Four. Just the ground type Elite Four member alone, the Alolan Ninetales could put in some work, but for example, Quagsire could probably take this thing down. You'd have to switch out, and then you're dealing with switching out, and Electrode's completely SOL in that fight. Your best bet is to try to explode, and even then, there's so much tankiness on that team that I don't even think that thing would take one out. Then there's the Bug type Elite Four member, who's just a weird wild card. Uxie's not going to be any help there. Hell, even Medicham is going to be basically neutral against that team. The only thing you really have there is Panseer, and that thing is not even fully evolved. Then you got a Fire type Elite Four member, and one of them's with a Ghost type on the team. And that's not even going into the Psychic type Elite Four member after that, or Cynthia herself. This is not a team that can become the champion of Sinnoh. Nor can it become the champion in Unova. Now, Unova was actually a very unique thing. Normally, you run into an issue with the 4th gym leader with Eliza, who's got the 2 Emolgas, who are just nightmares. But this team, by the time you get there, actually would be pretty okay to handle it, because the Ninetales' Ice type would just take out the Emolgas quick. So you actually don't really have a problem with Eliza with this team. And therefore, you wouldn't have a problem with Clay, you wouldn't have a problem with Skyla, and you wouldn't have a problem with Bryson. You wouldn't even have a problem with either Iris or Drayden. Where you run into a problem is the Elite Four. Now, it's not impossible to beat the Elite Four, but the Elite Four are all combinations of fighting, dark, psychic, and ghost. They kind of have a good quartet going there. This team can handle the fighting without a huge amount of difficulty, except for the fact that the they do have like things like Sucker Punch on that team, even Dark type moves, which means even the Mon that have a typing advantages against them, like Uxie and Medicham, aren't gonna be the most effective. Yes, Ninetales does have Fairy type moves, but you might be able to manage the fighting type gym. You might fighting type Elite Four member. You might be able to manage the Dark type. In fact, I think you probably would have an easier time with a Dark type just because you have a Fairy and a fighting type on that team. What you would struggle immensely with is the Ghost and the Psychic type Elite Four member, because they're all roughly equal levels with each other. Your teams are just, this team's not tailored to deal with that. If hypothetically, say, the Blipbug and the Panseer were fully evolved in the Simisear and Orbeetle, you'd have a better chance. But no, you would have a better chance, at least on some level, against, say, the Psychic type, because you could have some more Bug type moves on there. But yeah, and then that's not even bringing in the champions, which Alolan Ninetales can handle Iris for a time, but it will eventually get taken out. It is just going to get completely curb stomped after a bit. But it would theoretically still be possible for Iris. I don't see you beating Alder, though. Alder is kind of nuts powerful. He's really underrated, and I really like his design. So, yeah, I don't think... And it would be close, but I don't think you can become champion in Unova. I think... Yeah, I actually do have to take back one thing I said. I do think you could become Kalos' champion as well. But it would be tough. The one gym you would struggle with, actually, you would struggle with the first gym immediately, but you should still be able to do it. Medicham, Bugs are not actually resistant to Psychic. They're neutral. They are strong against it. The gym you would struggle with immediately would be the third gym, because you, again, still only have Meditite at this point, Blipbug, and Panseer. And you have 3 partially or fully evolved fighting types, and a Hawlucha, which has Flying Press, which is a flying fighting type move. So... And I'm going to be flat out. But I don't think it's impossible, because once they switch into that Hawlucha, you switch out and then try to do as much damage and then try to get the damage in. I think it's possible you could beat the gym. Not probable, but still possible. And therefore, if you can get past that, which is possible, you'd get Ninetales at that point, which would deal with the grass type gym, no problem. All the other gyms are not really any big issue. You honestly would struggle a bit with the Elite Four. The Fire type would be problematic because you have nothing really strong against fighting here. The Water type would not be that big a deal. You'd handle the Dragon, no problem. And the Steel you can handle with Medicham. Diantha is definitely one of the more unique champions for a team. It's a very varied team. Like I said, with the Dragon types on our team, you could handle those no problem with Ninetales. So that's already 2/3 of our team gone. It's same with Gourgeist. Ninetales can handle that, no problem. It's Aurorus, it's Hawlucha, and it's Gardevoir that are your biggest problems. But I think you could become champion here, because Ninetales was going to go through most of those guys pretty quick. So by the time Ninetales goes down, you still have your 3 big hitters with Mega Medicham, Electrode, and Uxie. Galar, honestly, you could probably get the majority of Galar without too much issue. You just can't beat Leon. That's really what it comes down to. You're not beating Leon. He's too powerful. Like, his team's too varied. Even with Alolan Ninetales there to hopefully try to deal with Dragapult, it outspeeds. If I'm not mistaken, Dragapult outspeeds, and I believe that thing has Flamethrower on it. So that Ninetales, even if it were to take out the Dragapult, it's going down hard. And yeah, Mega Medicham can only do so much. Yeah, his team is very well balanced. So unfortunately, that's a no. I don't think you can beat Leon. And then last but not least, Paldea, right out the gate. I'm going to say no. Like, I didn't even finish going to the gym leaders before I realized very quickly, you can't beat Io. You can't beat Io. You would only have Panseer, Blipbug, and a Meditite still at that point. You can't beat Io. She's gonna, because once that Meditite goes down, you're done. You're absolutely done. Even then, you'd still struggle with Norman. You would struggle with the Water type gym leader. You would struggle with struggle with Rhyme. you'd struggle with all of the other teams, frankly, because all the other teams, except for ironically Grusha, you could beat him without that much difficulty. But yeah, you'd struggle with all of them. And then the Elite Four, that Elite Four also is legitimately a tough Elite Four to deal with. That's a legitimately good Elite Four. Because you've got to deal with Flying Dragon, Ground, and Steel. And 3 of those are types that are strong against this team. Yeah, you're not getting through that Elite Four. You're just not. So Kalos and Johto are your best bets to become a champion with this team, at least in the order that you get these Mon in. Now, granted, as it ultimately fell down to the fact you couldn't beat the Elite Four, so it didn't really matter one way or the other about what the order was. That's usually what happens. Because it's not about, oh no, you can't even beat the first gym. It's about, can you beat the champion? That's what it comes down to. Now, there's been a couple moments where you can't beat someone earlier on, but hypothetically, you could beat the champion. There have been moments like that, but regardless. What do you think? Do you like this team for Blossom? Let me know in the comments below. Until then, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Later.